Hi there, this is Popo, I hope you're all fine. Welcome to the Matches New Era Tournament, round 1. And today we're going to review the two games played between a Lolo and a praseodymiumspike. So let's get started. For the first game, Lolo would play the Demons faction with the white pieces, and praseodymiumspike has a very special role in the tournament, which is the Scarber rule. So it basically would play the second faction the player he faces would play on the second game. For example, Lolo on this tournament would play the Demons, then the Kobolds. So praseodymiumspike would play the Kobolds, then the Demons on this encounter. So let's present a little the factions. The Devil is a very attacking, straightforward faction with broken pattern and asymmetric stuff. This is very hard to play against, and they are basically tricksters. But they are very bad in defense, so basically if you fail your attack, you're screwed and you're going to lose the game. On the contrary, the Kobold pieces is a faction that can very well defend, but it is more inflicting some static effects. Basically, the pieces are going to burrow into the ground, and when they rise up again, the pieces, in some conditions, are just paralyzed, can't move, can't capture for several turns, so very interesting mechanic. So we're going to see how it's done in this game. The game starts with pawn to e4 and we have pawn to e5. I can already discuss this first move because of the move of the demon pieces. If you want to get the pattern, you just have to see on the left when I click on the pieces, it shows how it goes. So for example, here on the charge rune, the black square shows where the piece is, the white squares shows where the piece can go, and for move and capture I mean, and the gray squares show where the piece can jump to move and capture. So this means that this is a queen by 3 that can get one square backwards, but it can already jump on the d5 squares, so exactly 4 squares forward. So this piece is terrifying as a queen type unit. So you have to play against this kind of development. So there are several ways to play against this. You can play, for example, pawn to e6 and get some kind of French defense, and somehow you get this move, somehow they want to trade and try to get development, but when you play pawn to c6, somehow the game gets a little peaceful, even though if you have to get very careful, because there are a lot of tricks in this opening. Another way to play this is try to play the Caro-Kann, for example. Even I don't really like the way you can play against the Caro-Kann, so basically you can get the same idea here, but yeah, not convinced at all, because okay, I mean there's some moves, but you have to be careful because this would be captured here, so maybe you have to play this time pawn to e6. Yeah, okay, not convinced. I don't really like the Caro-Kann in classical chess, so this is maybe I'm biased this way. So in this game, after pawn to e5, we have pawn to d4. Pawn to d4 is pretty interesting because it invites the capture, and of course you don't have to capture, because if this, then we have devil captures, and the idea is to push the pawn, then get the devil here, and that would basically be check, and the king is forced to uncastle this way. So this is not something you want to get on the board. So anyways, so after pawn to e4, pawn to e5, pawn to d4, pawn captures. And yeah, the game gets complicated suddenly, because after devil captures d4, now you have to be very careful about this pawn push. I mean, the game is not lost, but your moves have to be very precise, and you have to try to avoid this squares to be everable. So I don't really know how you could get somewhere. But yeah, let's see. In the game, praseodymiumspike decided to play Lancer to g5 with an interesting idea, is that as the imp on C on the split rune doesn't capture diagonally here, it just goes this way and this way. This is a direct threat against the piece, and as you say, the devil is pretty weak and can't go backwards to defend. I mean, this can be just countered very easily with imp to e3, because just this is in the way. But Lolo played another powerful move with rook to f3, ignoring completely the threat here. And why? Because this piece is not free. If you capture this, this is check, right? But there's another piece which has a broken pattern, which is the Spire. And you see with the fulcrum that it can jump exactly 2 squares orthogonally on the sides and frontal. So it can just capture the Lancer and basically the game is over for you. So seeing the mistake, praseodymiumspike decided to play the Lancer to h5. This is not a very good square. I mean, this is almost better to get to d8, but anyways, this is a move. And now we have pawn to e5, and now, yeah, the default's just to uncastle the king, and you have basically try to hide the king as you can. This is very hard to prevent this. I mean, there's no real way. If you try with, for example, Lancer to g6 to try to control the square, the very simple rook to h4 control all the squares here, and you don't have any ways to do it. I mean, you can try to get Lancer to c6, but now the imp would develop to d3, attacking the Lancer, and then you can't prevent this from happening. So, very sad for you. So after pawn to e5, we have rat to c6 getting early development, but default to e4 check is played, king to d8, and now the imp developed on d3. And already you see that white is slightly better with very coordinated pieces, but here, like, you don't have something great here for the black pieces. And this is going to worsen because we have pawn to d6, which is played. And this is a pretty bad move, because now the imp can capture on c6 with check. And this is a big check, because here you see that every square is controlled. So basically, the capture is mandatory. So now the devil infiltrates with capture on c6, and the den is attacked, so you have basically to move it. So after, for example, den to b8, then you can follow up with, for example, imp to e4, which is a very powerful move, because it attacks here on the h5, and also put pressure here. And you have to be just careful, because there's a trap with Lancer g6. You can't capture here, else this is going to be check, and then you're going to lose your piece. Remember that it can't really go back. So after this, you just have to play the very simple yet incredible Spire to a3, because now the Spire just defend the piece here, and later on the imp can just proceed. Like, this is just an incredible game. So anyways, so pawn takes e5 is played on the game, which is basically a mistake, because now it hangs the den. I mean, in this position, you're dead lost in terms of position. So maybe this is why praseodymiumspike meant to blunder a lot of times. So devil takes a8 is played, and then mole to c5 is played. I don't know why this is played, but this is a blunder because of the very awful looking move, imp to e4. Look at this. This is a very ugly fork against two pieces, and you can't do anything to defend yourself. So here the mole sacrifices itself on f2, and the rook takes. So now this is defending forever this piece. Very cool. Here the Lancer has to move, so it moves basically on g6. And now the imp very calmly play imp to c5, and this is check for the king here. So the king can't even defend this mole, so it's just condemned to play, for example, king to e7, not to be checked here with tempo. But you already see that, yeah, black has been a very bad time. And we have devil takes c8, and there are a lot of mate threats, so you have to be very careful. And I'm not even sure you can just prevent all the mate threats. I mean, you're down 20, you're down 10 points of material. This is not developed, this is not developed, the king is completely surrounded by all the pieces. You see, this is controlled here, this is controlled here, this is controlled there, this is controlled, excuse me, here. Like, you're dead lost. So this is very hard to avoid this, and you don't have even a way to check. So there's Lancer to c6, which is attempt to just try to control this square and avoid the checkmate, but the mate threat was coming rather from this. And here you see that this is protected, and this is basically mate. So this is on the 15th move on the game that Lolo just won the game by checkmate. This is actually very hard and very brutal with the demons. But don't worry, praseodymiumspike would play the demons on the second game and would get his revenge, and we're going to see this game just now. Okay, so for the second game, we invert the places. So praseodymiumspike is now playing the demons as white, and lolo is playing the kobolds as black. So we have for this game pawn to e4, pawn to e6, so the French defense, pawn to c4, which is a little weird, but I guess the idea is to over-control this square on the d5. Red to c6 claims the dark squares, so rook to f3 is played, with pawn to b6, a little fianchetto, and now pawn to e5, which is a little weird, but this can be understood by the fact that it wants to develop the devil here and go here. Maybe you develop first your piece and then you go to attack, but a little too early, because now we have a pawn to d5 which is played and try to claim this square. I mean, you can try to get en passant here, but I guess that praseodymiumspike was afraid of this kind of development, and you see that black seems to get a little better in the development even if the control of this square is not met. But once, for example, this is played, then right to f6 and you have the control, and basically you're going to crush your opponent. So yeah, on this move, pawn captures, and now into e3, adding some pressure here. The only problem with this move, and this is met by pawn to d4. And now, yeah, this imp looks very stupid because it has to go up. But anyways, imp to f5 is played, this is check, and this is a fork also to this piece, so very interesting. So the mole is forced to capture, and then the rook recaptures. So yeah, nothing so serious about here. The only problem is that the rook is very vulnerable, and this is a pawn hanging here. So we have a lancer to d7 trying to get the rook, and this is defended by the devil to f3. Putting the rook here was also an option, but I can understand that you don't want to. So devil to f3 is played, and now we have a long castle. Why? For the very simple reason that the devil threats to get a check here, and the king would be forced to get here. So of course you don't want that. So we have a long castle. And maybe some of you were thinking this is maybe a blunder, because now there's this move, and this is a fork, and you can't capture because this is defended here. Yes and no at the same time, because there's this ugly rat to e5, and now you see that this is targeting this, so you have to move up to save your piece, but this can't be captured backwards, so basically you lose a piece. So this is not possible, and this is why pawn to b3 is tried. I have to say that I'm not really convinced of this move, to be honest. I mean, the idea was to develop the imp later. If you prefer this, then why not trying this move? And then you develop the imp this way, and this is easier even to defend this pawn, which is hanging, by the way. So, I don't know. So, pawn to e3 is played, but now rat takes e5, and you have to move the devil to protect this. And this is not easy, because the devil is, of course, very strong, but at the same time very weak. And this square was interesting to defend this, but this is controlled by the rat, so this is not possible. So devil to e4 is played. And yeah, I would have not played that. Even I understand that if you play this, maybe there's this in the way, but you just exchange and you try to survive. But here, after devil to e4, now then to e8 is played, and there's a discover attack laying on this devil, so you have to be careful. So castle is played. Yeah. I mean, this is very hard to develop these three pieces. I mean, just cut down. Even the Spire, which is normally a very strong piece and very easy in terms of development, is very weak. So maybe you wait very, I don't know, slowly and try to get the imp on the game. I don't know. So castle is played, and now red to f6. And here you have to continue to defend your rook, and this seems to be harder and harder. Because, yeah, what can you try here in this position? You can try, for example, the devil to f4, maybe. But then I guess maybe the mole develops on d6, and then there are all kinds of discover check. But even if you try this, maybe now the right to g6 can be played. And after devil to f3, you have to be very careful, because now the den comes into play. And now this is a very Kobold stuff, like this seems to be completely, I don't know, weird. But I mean, let's say I would play a move like in here. I can just decide to unborrow here with my special ability, and then you see that this threats to capture on the next turn the devil, because one stuff on the Kobolds is that it threats to go on a square, but it can also use the den as a matter of fact, and it just lands, you see, on the surround 2 squares of the 2 dens, and it gets the studded effect, so it would just be screwed. So this is why in the game we have devil to d4, which is play. I don't think this is meant, because okay, I see that there's a queen trade, but the only problem is that this is completely hanging, so the rock is gone basically. But we have a Spire to e1, which is interesting because it attacks the Lancer, so the Lancer has to move somewhere. Lancer to g5 is played. Honestly, I think that Lancer here to g6 is a little more precise, but this is just personal, because you're sure that you would get the dark squares and the light squares at the same time with these pieces. But anyways, Lancer to g5 is played, and this allows pawn to f4, which is straight up fork, and you have to survive this basically. So Lolo tries to play red to f3 check, so this is a nice fork and you can't capture because this is just pinned, and king to f1 is played. Okay, interesting. Maybe something would be more interesting, just to play this, and the threat just remains here and here, so yeah, you have to be careful. But I can understand after this there would be maybe captures, and then you basically, I don't know, you try to move somewhere, maybe here, and now the game continues. I don't know, this is just up 3 pawns of materials, I don't know. So king to f1 is tried, but now the rat captures on h2, and again, just go here. And now you have to deal with 2 threats. This is doable, but yeah, I don't know why. So king to e2 is played instead, and yeah, king to e2 is somehow very, 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 very dangerous, because now the den can just tries to get, and remember, the den is very powerful with the Kobold faction, so that would be check again, and basically you have to find a new way to get check, and once this Lancer basically can get out of check, you're just alive. I can also wonder if this was possible here. Yeah, you get out of check, and then your pieces are leaving, also the devil is leaving, but I mean, the position seems to be slightly better for black than white, obviously. And here, yeah, what do you play in this position? Because if you try to get this, then you're going to have a very bad time here, because this is pinned, okay? After this move here, if you decide to get this here, I guess this is not great, because there's a fork here, I guess. So that doesn't work. If you go here and you decide to go here, then it's going to get a little more complicated also. What do I say about just simply this? So basically, yeah, maybe this was a little better, I don't know. So anyways, so then to e4 is played. This is a little brute force, but okay, exchange all the pieces as you see. And now black is up 6 points of material, so yeah, again to win a game. And this is more than 6 points of material for me, because these pieces can't do anything. I mean, they're taking their time, but very hard. So after Spire captures, we have mole to c5, and I guess he controls even more squares. And what's very funny about this is that you can try to unborrow here, because the mole targets with the unborrow like this. Once the den is on the game, you can try to get some big checks. So rook to c3 is played, targeting the mole, but I guess black is okay for this trade. Rook to g4 is played, and now this is Spire captures. I have to say that I'm very surprised of this move, but yeah, I can understand also why. I mean, maybe the threat is to get this check here. Yeah, it can be understandable. So Spire captures, Lancer captures, and now rook takes c5 and pawn captures. So now the king is pretty lonely, he defends just the pawn, but I think you're going to lose now. So then to e8, into b2, we have Lancer to g3 check, king to e2, Lancer to e4 check, king to d1, and I mean, there's surely a way to get a checkmate here, even if you have to be very careful with this shenanigan stuff. So, I don't know. What is played? Lancer to f3 check, yeah, why not? King to c2 is played, with then captures on f4, why not? And now the Spire lands on f3, so it doesn't do much stuff for now, but yeah, it's quite helpful. We have Lancer to e4 check, yeah, why not? The imp blocks, and simply Lancer to f5, and now this is just a pin, so you can't move. So Spire to c3 is played, and very interesting idea, you defend, and at the same point you attack this. But now we have then to d4, which is played, a very big pressure over here. A pawn to f4 is played, and now the very brute force move, Lancer takes d3, Spire captures, then captures, king captures. Why? Because there's 3 passed pawns here, and basically this is winning. So for the rest of the moves, you see that there's no chance for white to get even the game, and after the then guts, there's just some pawns captured. Now the king joins the party, and the idea is just to checkmate the white king, and this would happen 10 moves later, and this is on the moves 67 that finally Lolo decided to end the game with this is very nice checkmate, then to d1. So this was for this encounter. So I mean, this was really brutal, I have to say. We didn't see more of the ability of the two factions, but maybe in the later round we'll get them. So I hope you like this video, and we're going to see each other for the next encounter I'm going to showcase you for this round 1 of the matches in your tournament. See you then, bye.